The storm came in fast, like a beast unleashed from the mountains. Snow swirled in heavy sheets, blinding the roads and rattling the windows of a small wooden house tucked at the edge of a quiet town. Inside sat Mrs. Eleanor Carter, a 76-year-old widow with a frail frame but a spirit as steady as the oak tree in her front yard. She had grown used to long winters alone, a quilt wrapped around her shoulders and a cup of tea in her hand. But this storm, she could feel, was different. It wasn't just going to trap her, it was going to test her. Around 9 p.m., the low rumble of engines cut through the howling wind. At first, Eleanor thought she was imagining it. Who would be riding motorcycles in weather like this? But soon the sound grew louder, until she could see a line of headlights glowing through the snow. Her heart skipped. These weren't ordinary travelers. These were bikers, 15 of them, leather jackets glistening with wet snow, patches of the Hells Angels stitched across their backs. To the townsfolk, that name meant trouble. Her first instinct was fear. Alone, elderly, with a storm trapping them all in, what could she possibly do? Yet when the men pulled into her driveway, their bikes nearly sliding across the icy gravel, Eleanor saw something in their faces that softened her nerves. They weren't menacing. They were desperate. Frost clung to their beards and their hands trembled as they tried to brush snow from their eyes. One of them, a towering figure with tattoos peeking from his collar, stepped forward and knocked on her door. "Ma'am," he said, his voice rough but respectful. "We don't mean any harm. The storm's too bad to keep riding. We just need a place to get warm. Just for the night." Eleanor hesitated only a second before opening her door wider. "Come in," she said simply. "You'll freeze to death out there." The bikers exchanged glances, as if surprised she had agreed. They filed in one by one, stomping snow from their boots, their leather jackets dripping onto her old rug. They filled her small living room completely, 15 big, rugged men and one tiny grandmotherly figure. She led them to the fire, offering blankets and the extra chairs she had. Some sat cross-legged on the floor, their shoulders hunched, clearly embarrassed to be crowding her space. Eleanor could see the weariness in their eyes. These weren't villains. They were travelers caught in a fight with nature, and for tonight, they needed her kindness. The storm raged through the night, winds shrieking against the walls. Eleanor brewed pot after pot of tea, found canned soup in her pantry, and even brought out her husband's old chessboard to break the tension. The bikers warmed up slowly, their laughter starting to echo off the walls. One of them, the leader who had knocked, introduced himself as Jack. "We don't usually ask for help," he admitted, "but you saved us tonight." Most people slam the door when they see our jackets. Eleanor just smiled. A cold man is a cold man, no matter what's on his back. That night, something remarkable happened. These men who lived by the roar of engines and the toughness of the open road softened in the presence of her gentleness. They listened to her stories about growing up during the war, about raising 3 children in that very house, about losing her husband 5 years ago and learning to live with silence. In return, they shared bits of their own lives, some funny, some painful. One had a daughter he hadn't seen in years. Another carried the regret of choices made too young. Around the fire, with snow burying the world outside, they weren't outlaws or strangers. They were human beings craving connection. But the night wasn't without its challenges. With so many men in her small home, tensions flared. 2 bikers argued over space near the fire, their voices rising enough to shake the walls. Eleanor, without a hint of fear, stepped between them. "This is my home," she said firmly. "In this house, there will be peace." To their own surprise, both men backed down immediately, mumbling apologies like scolded schoolboys. Respect for her was instant and absolute. Later, when the power flickered and went out, the house plunged into darkness. The men instinctively moved to shield her, pulling out flashlights and making sure she was safe. They worked together to keep the fire alive, chopping wood from her small pile and even braving the storm to gather more. The storm that could have left Eleanor vulnerable instead gave her 15 unlikely protectors. By morning, the snow had stopped. The world outside was blanketed in white, sparkling under the pale sun. Eleanor thought the bikers would leave quickly, eager to get back on the road. Instead, they lingered, reluctant to walk away from the warmth they had found inside. Before leaving, Jack placed a gloved hand on hers. "You'll never be forgotten, ma'am. You gave us shelter when nobody else would. We owe you." Eleanor thought that was the end of it. But the next day, as she was sweeping her porch, the ground began to tremble with the familiar roar of engines. She looked up, and her eyes widened. Down the road came not 15 motorcycles, but nearly 100. The line stretched as far as she could see, chrome gleaming, leather jackets flapping in the cold air. They filled her driveway and lined the street, their engines rumbling like thunder. Jack was at the front, his bike shining in the sunlight. He removed his helmet and grinned. "We told the others about you," he said. "They all wanted to meet the woman who showed us what real kindness looks like." One by one, the bikers dismounted, each carrying something: bags of groceries, stacks of firewood, repairs for her old house. They had come not just to visit, but to give back. For hours, they worked around her property. They fixed her sagging porch steps, patched her leaky roof, stocked her pantry until it overflowed, and even repaired her broken fence. The quiet street that had once been wary of these men now buzzed with their laughter and the sound of hammers. Neighbors peeked from behind curtains, astonished to see the feared Hell's Angel serving a frail old woman with such care. Slowly, a few gathered the courage to step outside, and by evening, even the most suspicious neighbor was shaking hands and sharing coffee with the bikers. The storm had forced a collision of two worlds that never should have met, yet in that collision, something beautiful had bloomed. When the sun set, the bikers gathered once more in front of her house. Jack spoke for all of them. "You gave us shelter, ma'am, but more than that, you gave us respect. You saw us as men, not monsters. We'll never forget that. This house is family now. If you ever need us, one call, and we'll come." Eleanor's eyes filled with tears as she looked at the sea of bikes before her. In all her years of living, she had never felt so surrounded by love and protection. The storm that had threatened to isolate her forever had instead brought her the greatest gift: connection. From that day on, Eleanor was never truly alone again. Every few weeks, a handful of bikes would rumble down her road, riders stopping by with groceries, to chop firewood, or simply to sit and listen to her stories. The woman once known only as the quiet widow on the edge of town became, in the hearts of many, the grandmother of the Hell's Angels. The story of Eleanor and the bikers spread far beyond her town. It wasn't about gangs or reputations anymore. It was about humanity, how kindness can bridge the widest divides, how one simple choice to open a door can ripple out and change countless lives. In the end, Eleanor's legacy wasn't just the warmth she gave on a cold night. It was the lesson she taught, that compassion costs nothing, but it can build everything. And as long as the sound of engines echoed down her road, she knew she would never again face a storm alone. Message to leave viewers with: sometimes, the people we fear the most are the ones who need kindness the most. When we choose compassion over judgment, we don't just change someone else's life, we change our own.